Have you ever heard someone say Aries are so impulsive and hot-headed? Well, there is some truth to that, and it's actually not a bad thing. While their energy might be intense at times, they are also inspiring us to take action. If you've ever seen an Aries take action, you know what I'm talking about. They just go for it without giving a frick of what other people think of them or what the consequences could be, which isn't always for their own best either, but it remains inspiring nonetheless. Especially if you are someone who struggles with that initiative energy. As the first sign of the zodiac, Aries is a true trailblazer. Hello and welcome back. If you're new to the channel, my name is Strada. In this series, we're diving into the different energy of each zodiac sign as a tool for self-discovery. As I mentioned in the introduction video, we are not just one sign, but we actually have all 12 signs inside of us in different intensities. So it's not about identifying which sign you are, but rather understanding where and how that specific sign shows up in your life. If you haven't watched the introduction video yet, I suggest you do. It will just give you a better understanding. There are actually two introduction videos in this series. The first one is explaining a little bit more about the series itself and the fact that we have all 12 zodiac signs inside of us. The second one is about explaining how the zodiac sign is made of, basically, like the modality, the element and the polarity. And I think especially the second video will be really helpful to you if you're totally new to astrology. So let's look at Aries and its main characteristic and how it shows up. As the first sign of the zodiac, Aries has all the initiative power. It's a cardinal modality, it's a positive polarity, and it's a fire sign. And on top of that, Aries season starts at the beginning of spring. So it has all that initiative, that starting energy inside of it, which is also what we see when we see a typical Aries. It's like they just go for it, they start things, they don't look left or right, they just get going. If we look at it in terms of symbolism, the Aries is represented by the ram. So I want you to think of that animal if you want to get a better idea what their energy is about. The way they lock horns with one another to prove dominance, but also how they get like entangled with their horns and are unable to untangle themselves again. So it really highlights that energy of butting heads because we just start running without looking left and right, and sometimes we get entangled or end up in like entangled situations because of our own enthusiasm and because we didn't take the time to think things through. Every zodiac sign has a phrase attributed to it. With Aries, it's the phrase I am, showing its egoistical nature. And it's not egoistic in a bad way, but rather in I take care of myself. So it's about my own needs, my own curiosity, my own interest. It's just about what I care about and not so much what other cares about. But again, I want you to think of it in terms of it's our ability to stand up for ourselves and take care of ourselves. So depending on which way it goes, obviously it can become a bad thing where we lose any sense of empathy and we don't care about others anymore. But on the other side, it's also something that is really, really important. Our ability to understand our own needs and like take that initiative energy or take action to fulfill those needs. I think the word ego or being egoistic has become very unpopular, especially from a spiritual perspective, because it's like, oh, you're so selfish. But if you think about it, we need that selfishness in order to survive. If we always only think about other people, how are we supposed to survive, or at the very least also be happy? We might be able to survive, but how are we supposed to be happy if we always disregard our own needs? So in the right amount, being egoistic is actually very healthy because it can also get us out of unhealthy situations, for example, an unhealthy relationship. As I mentioned in the beginning, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and the 12 zodiac signs actually represent a journey from beginning to end. Like if you think of it in terms of a life, from the moment you're born to the moment you die. So it's kind of that evolutionary stages that they represent. And since Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, again, it highlights its egoistical nature, like it's all about me, because when you think about it, the moment we are born, all we care about is our own need. And in the same sense, Aries represents that childlike nature, to a certain degree also very arrogant, but also naive in the sense that we are not mature enough to foresee certain consequences of the actions that we take. But there's also this naivety in the sense that we believe ourselves to be invincible. Like a child doesn't really worry about something happening to him, it just goes and plays. And Aries has that same energy of thinking, well, nothing can go wrong. And that optimism actually doesn't come so much from fate as it comes from lack of experience. So if you think about it, maturity has a lot to do with experience. You do things, you learn from those things, hopefully, but it's that like a level of experience that allows you to have a little more foresight. And the Aries energy kind of lacks that foresight because it lacks the experience. Aries is also a lot about exploring and conquer the world. So it's all about the conquest and never about the journey. There was never an Aries that said the journey is the goal. It's all about the conquest. It's all about achieving something. And once that goal is achieved, Aries is like done with it and moves on to the next thing. And it's actually what makes them such inspiring leaders, because they're able to step into the unknown with such confidence without fearing of what could go wrong. That's just like, they don't even question it, they just go for it. However, since Aries is all about that initiative energy, about being inspired by something and taking action on it, it also means that they do not have a lot of staying power. So once they have reached a goal, they're kind of done with it and move on to the next thing. And it also comes because Aries needs a challenge. So if a goal is not really challenging or not really interesting, they don't even start that. But if they feel like I can prove myself, they're totally into it and they go for it until they have achieved that goal. So it's actually interesting because Aries has a kind of a paradox in that sense, because on one side it's all about the goal, and in order to achieve a goal you have to see it through to the end. However, in order to see it through to the end, it has to remain interesting throughout the journey. So it's not about, oh my god, this is so interesting, and then in between I have to do like a very mundane thing. Then Aries is the kind of characteristics that checks out and it's like, okay, I don't care about it. But if there's like constant challenges and like mini goals in between that Aries can accomplish or achieve, then it's easier for them to stay until the end, until they have reached the ultimate goal. But there needs to be this sense of challenge, this sense of being able to prove themselves, not so much about proving themselves to the world, but rather proving that they can do it, proving that they are the best. As a cardinal sign, Aries is very self-motivated. So if they are inspired by it, that is enough for them to take action. Just the fact that it's like either, oh, this is cool, I want to do it, or I want to prove that I can do it, is enough motivation for them to get going. If we think of it in terms of romance, I'm sure you've heard it before, but it is said that as soon as Aries has conquered their object of desire, they move on to the next one. Because from an Aries perspective, there's no challenge to it anymore. It's like, okay, I achieved it, what am I supposed to do with it now, because it's not interesting anymore. And this is actually really helpful to know, especially if you strongly resonate to the energy of Aries, is how to keep things interesting. So I guess one of the challenge or problem lies that Aries expects things to be interest, and it kind of fails to see that it can make things interesting or challenging themselves. So if you want to achieve a certain workout goal, however the routine of having to work out is kind of boring to you, it's up to you to make the workout challenging and give it a sense of achievement after each workout. And the same goes in romance or relationship. It's like if you know that you need that sense of challenge, you can make it challenging for yourself. Like you can talk to your partner and be like, okay, I just need a little more variety or a little more challenge, and you can find solutions. That can be role play, it can be not seeing each other so often, whatever works for you, whatever gives you that sense of challenge or excitement to keep things interesting. But it goes the other way around as well. If you know that someone has that energy inside of them and needs them, like how can you make things more interesting and more challenging for them? So the thing that I really want you to get from this is that Aries is a great energy. It's that sense of conquest when we feel like on top of the world. But I want you to understand that it's a very quick energy and it can fade easily as well. So I want you to understand where this energy serves you and where it challenges you. Another thing to be aware of. Since Aries is such a quick moving energy, it has a tendency to act before it thinks, emotionally, verbally and physically. So it can be that it says things that are out of tact, or it can do something that kind of leads them injured because they didn't take the moment to think things through. It's just about that energy of acting before thinking or reacting before thinking that can kind of leave them in a bind. And this is also shown in their communication style. Aries have a tendency to be very straightforward and say what's on their mind because they don't have that filter. Remember, it's just like a child. It's like it doesn't really have the maturity, so it kind of says what it thinks, which can lead to them being like hurtful even though they don't mean to, but again they lack the maturity to be a little more tactful. On the other side, what's really great about them, what I really love about an Aries, is you always know where you're at. You like, there's no BSing with an Aries. They tell you what they think and you know exactly where you stand with them. So to wrap it up, Aries is bold, energetic, enthusiastic, courageous, reckless, confident, adventurous, determined, and quick-tempered. As always, I don't want you to categorize that into good or bad, because any negative traits can have its benefits as much as any positive traits can have its challenge. For example, acting before thinking, depending on the situation, can actually save your life or it can end it. And this is how I want you to look at any characteristic that I mentioned throughout the video. Just look at it and ask yourself, what's something good about this characteristic and what is a challenge that comes with it? Because I want you to learn to see the whole picture. Once you do that, first of all, you're free to choose and you don't feel like a victim to that characteristic anymore. Especially if it's a characteristic that you have been beating yourself up for one reason or another because you don't like it or people have told you how annoying it is. I want you to see that there's something good from it. And it's more about learning to use that intentionally and in a resourceful way instead of just blindly. And once you do that, you won't feel like a victim to it anymore. The other reason that I want you to look at characteristics from both perspectives is because there is a tendency to demonize ourselves. As I mentioned, either because we don't like it or because someone else kind of criticizes us for it, but actually that negative trait does serve us in a way, and we have to figure out how we can use it. Let me give you a personal example. I have Mercury in Aries. If you haven't watched the Planet series, Mercury is all about the mind, the way we think and the way we process information. And Aries, as I just explained, is like this very fast moving energy and it kind of acts before it thinks, and I notice that a lot in the way I speak. And the amount of time that I stumble open my own words, I use the wrong words, is incredible. It's like insane. And the amount of times that I have edited videos and I notice the mistakes and I'm like, I know that is wrong, but my mind is moving so fast that often I can't keep up with speaking, that I kind of mess up my speech. And I wish I could say it's because English is not my first language, but it actually happens in any language that I speak. So on one side it's really great because I process information really fast, which is cool, but when it comes to speaking, and this is something that I'm really learning to do right now, is to learn to slow down, to take pauses, to think about what it is that I want to say. Also in terms of being tactful, because especially in the past I was like very tactless and people have been telling me that over and over again. And with time, first of all, I learned to accept that about myself because honestly I like it and I want to be treated that way. I like when people are straightforward with me, but I have learned to communicate it in a more elegant way. Or at least I'm trying to. But it also made me aware that other people don't communicate the same way and they need more time. If you have a communication that is more water-like, you need to feel things and they are usually slower with speaking and stuff like that. But now I can like appreciate that and learn to relax and just wait and allow Aries just take a break, allow them to process in their own way. So to wrap it up and to reflect, I want you to ask yourself, where in your life does the Aries energy show up for you? Where does it benefit you and where are you challenged by it? Where do you act before you think? Where do you blindly storm into things without worrying about the consequences? Where do you have a tendency to be very impulsive but also very quick to react for better and worse? Where do you go after what it is that you really want? So really think about where in your life it shows up. Is it like with me? Is it in communication? Or could it be in the physical activity like sports and stuff like that? mindset, or is it more with relationship or your career? Like, where does that Aries energy show up for you, and how does it show up? What's the benefit of it and what's the challenge of it? So let me know in the comments down below. I would love to know how Aries shows up in your life. Otherwise, this is it for the video. Make sure to check out the other zodiac sign videos as well, because as I mentioned in the beginning, we have all 12 of them, and I'm sure you will be able to discover something new about yourself that might be very interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and I see you in the next